Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to Aetherdrift from start to finish. I'm your host, Harlis. You may have heard me talking about this set on the Magic Story podcast with my co-host, Natalie. But today, we are going to take you turn by turn through the design of this set. So first of all, representing the narrative design team, we have the very talented Roy Graham.
Hi, everybody. I'm Roy. I'm the story lead on Magic. That means I work with our writers, editors, lore masters, all to put together the web fiction, make sure that web fiction gets on cards for every set that Magic puts out, every Magic IP set, and that includes Aetherdrift.
Now, representing art, we have the ever-lovely Sarah Wassel.
Thanks, Harley. Hi. I am a senior art director in the collectability team, which is a little hair-splitty for all of you, but basically we kind of have different art directors that work on main set cards, and then we have art directors that work on the weirder cards with the different kind of art styles on them. But I'm very excited about this set racing. I hope that you're going to enjoy a lot of what we're showing you.
Yeah.
And rounding out today's drivers, we have Yanni Skolnick, representing both game design and vision design.
Hey. I'm a principal game designer. I've been working at WotC for over 10 years now. I was the game design lead on Strixhaven and Brothers War as well. So I started off on the vision design team, which was led by Mark Rosewater, and then he handed off to me for the bulk of the game design, which I carried to the finish line, working with these wonderful folks.
Awesome. All right, everybody, give it up for today's racing drivers. We are very excited to get onto the track and take off today. All right, so let's take our places with our first question. So in a world of dragons and elves and dinosaurs, where did the idea for a multiplanar race come from?
So I can't speak to where the idea of first landed on the schedule, but I know from a story perspective, from a world building perspective, Aetherdrift was this opportunity to really start to play with the idea of an interconnected multiverse. For people who follow along with the stories, and I think even people who don't follow along with the stories, I think it's starting to trickle through to the general awareness. After March of the Machine, the Magic multiverse is now connected by pathways called omen paths, meaning not only does everyone know that there are infinite crazy fantasy worlds out there within the multiverse, but you can travel between them now. Even non-planeswalkers can with a little luck and effort. And on a personal level, Magic is a combat game, right? You're trying to reduce your opponent's life totals, you are attacking with creatures. I think a lot of people would jump to a story about combat, sort of like a story about war, when exploring the idea of well, what do planes do when suddenly they know about interplanar neighbors? And the idea of well, instead of these two worlds going to war, what if there was a race? What if there was this attempt at competing for prestige, bragging rights, and some sense of planar superiority in a different way. I think it's a really interesting prompt, and it's not something we've ever done in Magic before.
Yeah. All right, now I grew up in a very small town, and one of the only interesting things there was actually a NASCAR track. So I clearly am very well-versed in this area, but I'm curious about y'all's influences that went into the set, and I'm going to start with you, Sarah.
Yeah, that is me on my dad's motorcycle. Yeah, and in my 30s, I started riding my own motorcycles, so I've been doing that for about 10 15 years now. So I was super psyched about this set because I love Fury Road and Akira and Death Race, and I also love the culture of people tricking out their rides. I think it's so fun. There's such a sense of individuality to it, and then there's this kind of amazing sense too where like what your vehicle looks like is only what you want, right? Like nobody is gonna come to you and be like, oh, I don't know about pink on your motorcycle. They're gonna be like, that's cool that you did that, because they understand that it's like so central to who you are for your vehicle to be like reflect who you are, and you feel safe on it, you feel comfortable, and you feel like you can go fast on it.
That's really interesting because I feel like that same ethos goes into like Magic players, right? Like like deck building, personal
totally
expression
true.
through what you're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Roy, you're up next.
Oh, well, yeah, this was actually sort of a challenging one from a narrative perspective because when I'm working on a story for, like when I was working on Outlaws of Thunder Junction, I could go back and read Lonesome Dove, I could read like Larry McMurtry, a bunch of old classic Westerns to get ideas for like structure and character and those sort of elements. There's not like a lot of like classic racing literature. So I was drawing a lot of my inspiration from like movies and shows. Sarah mentioned Mad Max. That's obviously a big inspiration for me. I also love the Fast and the Furious movies.
Y'all heard of those?
Speed Racer, obviously, the original Speed Racer, but also the Wachowski sisters' Speed Racer adaptation, deeply underrated movie, I think. And Miguel Lopez, shout out, he was the world building set lead on this, is like an F1 fanboy, so he brought a lot of like really deep nerdiness in that regard.
I can't believe you didn't mention Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That is like classic racing that was based on a motorcycle race in the desert.
Is that true?
Yeah. That's why he was there in Vegas. He was covering that race. We'll talk later.
I got some reading to do.
Yeah.
What about you, Yanni?
Yeah, so I'll shout out Donald Smith on the game design team, was our game design racing expert who introduced me to Formula One and the movie Redline. Personally, I came to this mostly thinking about action movies. I think we have one of my favorite cards, Outpace Oblivion here, showing just you're escaping lava that's flowing at you from a volcano, and just thinking about these gonzo action scenes was the biggest inspiration for me. Also, a lot came from video games. My personal favorite was Crash Team Racing, but I wanted to get one card that was just a very loud reference to karting video games, and I love how the Spike Shell Harrier came out. Most of the robots have jobs like pilot or artificer, but I love that this robot's job is turtle. Just gets on the track and hunts
I wish
people
my job
down.
was turtle.
Yeah. And then, honestly, I love wordplay, so this pothole mole, I just heard this concept for a name come out, and I was like, we got to do pothole mole. And I also love how the gameplay came out, because it gives me the same feeling when I'm out on my car driving over potholes that I get in games now when I'm trying to get to max speed and my opponent keeps playing 2-3s.
All right, now every race has a prize, and this one is pretty epic, to say the least. So, Roy, what's at stake here? Does this impact the whole multiverse? Does this impact individual storylines?
Right. So the prize at the end of the Gearper Grand Prix is the Aether Spark, which is a mysterious device that grants one person the ability to planeswalk, a planeswalker spark of their own, which is a pretty big deal. As for whether this is like a big multiversal story or a more individual, intimate one, this is cheating. I kind of want to say both. Like, obviously, no planes are getting invaded here. There's no like Phyrexian invasion, any of that. And there's a lot of character focus on this. But you also have the story moving across 3 different planes. Like I was saying earlier, this is your first glimpse at like planner politics, which is really cool. So I think ultimately the great thing about Magic story is that you can have an intimate story that is focused on characters, and then also you have like 300 cards to see the broad scope of everything else that's going on. So both big sweeping story and intimate cool story.
We'll take it.
His answer is yes.
All right, so 3 planes. Obviously, that's going to be a bit of a challenge for every single department that touches. It's thrice the fun, but thrice the complication. So we'll start with Roy. How did you choose who to put in the story?
Oh, I mean, there's always a lot of factors that go into this, right? Like, Chandra makes a lot of sense because she's really relevant to Avishkar. It's not just that she looks cool on a motorcycle. She is from Avishkar originally. She has a lot of ties to that plane. It made a lot of sense. But then, you also have to think about who's going to be important in terms of like the larger story arc. Aetherdrift is number 3 in what we're thinking of as the 4-set Dragonstorm arc, which we'll get back to a little later. But you got to think about like who's going to be important to that. And then there are game design considerations also. Yanni and I talk about like what the right color is for the Planeswalker slot, what the last Planeswalker that we had was, and all that. So it's a pretty big equation. It's a negotiation, and I think we got somewhere pretty cool.
I agree. I really do love this story. It was really fantastic to get to narrate and also cover on the Magic Story podcast. Now, Sarah, similar question. How does the art department react when you have 3 very distinctly different planes to represent in one set? How do you create a cohesion in what is pretty chaotic?
Yeah, it's I feel like it kind of sounds a little more complicated than it actually is, because our studio has like a process for world building, right? And we ask the same questions every time, and we think about the same conflict engine. How is that going to play out? And who are the heroes? And what are the weirdos? And what are the moments of beauty and the moments of fear and the moments of grossness? So having 3 just means more fun things to get to do. And then, the worlds start to get built up and the details start to come into focus, and then you get to get in this space of you're comparing them to each other all the time and using them to build distinctness against each other. So it's not harder, I would say, just more complex in a really fun way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, now, Yanni, vehicles, kind of a challenging card type.
Yep.
Now, is it supposed to be, apologies, we've seen vehicles in Magic, obviously, but never depicted at high speed on this level. So how do you pull that off in vision and card design?
Yeah, we knew from the start this was going to be a challenging set. Vehicles are a very challenging card type to work with. They have a lot of different effects on the game, where when you have one vehicle, it tends to make the game a lot more aggressive. But when you get multiple vehicles stacking up on the board, it tends to bog the game down and reward the blockers. So I'm always up for a challenge. I heard about this set and was interested in working on it, mostly because I wanted to get to play off that challenge. And when we hear the term speed and race in Magic, it's usually talking about very aggressive games that are ending quickly. But also, this is a multi-day race, and in real-life racing, races are often multiple hours. D&D 500 is 500 miles, hundreds of laps. So I was very interested in figuring out how we were going to thread that needle.
Yep. Okay, let's start our engines and dig into the first plane that we come into in the story, which is Avishkar, formerly known as Kaladesh. Roy, can you kick us off?
Yes, Avishkar has always been this hotbed of innovation and art and technology. I think it made a lot of sense as the location, the starting point for our race. I was talking a little bit about planner politics earlier. This is Avishkar's attempt to solidify themselves as a planner center, a hub, as it were. Fans who have been astutely following along with the story all this time might have heard some suggestions that Ravnica is also making a bid for being a sort of multiversal hub. Yeah, that's what they're going for.
All right. Okay, now Sarah, let's talk about this plane visually.
Yeah, we've been to Avishkar before, so we had an established look and feel and vibe, but we also in this set wanted to kind of speak to the race's history of street racing in Avishkar, right? So for us, that kind of like led us to this place of designing more nighttime scenes for the race, and which is really fun because this means like the ether is glowing, and that's like highlighting and giving this like neon feel and like a nighttime scene.
You can feel the bass music off, like radiating off of these images.
The bass music and the rumbling engines and the screeching tires. Yeah, it was a really fun addition to what we know of the plane. We also designed a bunch of graffiti in the world guide. These are all kind of concept art that we shared with the artists who worked on the set so that they could create this really strong in-world feel. Because again, with this like underground racing idea, you kind of want to picture these cars like going through alleyways and going through areas that aren't like polished and full of businesses and things like that. So we even made up like a language, that these letter forms that were used in the set, because we wanted to like have really strong coherence, because it's not, it may sound counterintuitive, but we didn't want to just ask artists like, okay, like make up a language, like that's not gonna be coherent across like a number of cards. So when you see graffiti like on the revved up cards, in the background, it's all kind of based on the same letter forms, and then the artists for the individual commissions like added their spin to it. Yeah, it's so fun to picture a car posed in front of this in a back alley where like someone just won a race.
I wanted to show this piece as well because I think this really shows in world how that ended up applying in the set, and it's so bright, it's so colorful. Agreed, it just makes you feel like you want to kind of be there.
Yeah, it's really fun when we get to commission art that's like in-world art, so it's so meta, right? Like we make the world and we design the world and this is what it looks like, and then we're like, oh, but what are the people in the world if they're making art? How do they do it? Because it like speaks to their culture and their habits and who those people are.
Awesome. All right, now Yanni, let's talk about card design and mechanics for a bit.
Yeah, so for game design, Avishkar was always a slam dunk. It's the birthplace of vehicles. It's a plane filled with pilots and artificers. And we were also very excited to try using the energy mechanic to represent hitting the turbo, getting fuel in your car. That didn't end up working out for the main set, so it moved to the commander set, but it still came through in the Aether Rangers using the exhaust mechanic for those big boosts.
Awesome. All right. Now, there are 10 racing teams in this set, and each team is very different. I want each of you to take us through one of the teams. Roy, if you will kick us off.
Yeah, Yanni mentioned the Aether Rangers. They got to be my pick. Mostly, again, story perspective, they're the center of all of this like really juicy interpersonal drama and intrigue. So a little background for the set is that Chandra, hometown Avishkar girl, is not actually racing for the Avishkar team, which is the Aether Rangers.
And who her mother is working on.
Oh yeah. So that means that Pia had to find another co-captain, which is Sita Varma, aka Spitfire, a character who came about sort of organically during the outlining process. We realized that we saw 2 points of a triangle that we realized needed a third, and we brought her in as this perfect narrative foil. So Chandra is racing against her own mother. Her mother's disappointed that Chandra's not supporting, her home. And Sita's mother was killed in the Phyrexian invasion of Avishkar, so she has like a bunch of mom stuff too, and it just really results in like some really fascinating like human emotion in between all of the raucous action going on.
Yeah, one of my favorite things about Sita is actually in the very opening of the story when she's having a very real, very natural conversation with her father. They have very different viewpoints, and the way they talk really felt like when you're talking to someone who has a completely different viewpoint than you, and you're not really going to be able to change their mind, but you're still going to speak your piece.
Shout out to our author, Kira Arsenault Rivera, who really realized the hell out of that story. And that scene that you're talking about, in addition to being like an amazing little like very human, very believable interaction, it also shows us so much exposition about like where Avishkar has ended up now. We get like a a look into these two competing visions for what the plane can be, should be, and you barely even notice you're being explained to.
Absolutely. Agreed. All right, Sarah, what about you? I feel like I know what your favorite team is.
It's pretty easy guess. So after Roy's like heart and story and family drama and mom issues, I can't help it. Like, I just want to go for the style. I love the Speed Demons. They have this like 1980s kind of vibe to their racing suits where they have these like asymmetrical lines and there's like spikes everywhere and their vehicles are big and probably smelly and like there's big tires, and then, you know, here's Winter essentially with his demon behind him, and I can't get over Winter even though we're not in Duskborn anymore.
I love Winter.
I still believe I can change him.
Can we talk about how Loot is tiny little Loot in the cage on the front of Winter's?
This is what you monsters wanted.
I didn't realize until right now Luke was in that art.
I have like an eye for spotting Loot anywhere.
So this is an alt version by an artist I really love working with, Deathburger. He has this like gritty, really complex kind of like Belgian comic situation. He uses really, really controlled palettes. He basically uses like 2-3 colors in all of his art, which is incredible considering how much complexity and depth he gets out of that. And I love the two pieces together, right? The last one had like that gritty, like freeness, and you could like feel the car rumbling, and then this one is a little bit more contained, but like, look at the demon with this tiny little like gas can in his claws, and like the wrenches in the other one. Just, this artist's work just blows me away every time.
I want wrench jewelry now.
We can make this happen. Oh yeah, and this is just like a really amazing, fun flavor piece that Magic is so good at. Just like a bobblehead, yeah.
All right, Yanni, you're up.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Cordotten Keel Haulers, our blue-red pirates. They were one of the last teams to get figured out mechanically. We thought about them being the second artifact pair in addition to the robot team, but that ended up working better for the Speed Demons with their possessed cars and haunted toys. So they're kind of alone here caring about discard. We also considered having them be about combining pirates and vehicles, which survived to this Fearless Swashbuckler card, but caring about another creature type in addition to the red, white, and green, white teams that cared about mounts and vehicles proved to be a little complex. So I love that discard and caring about discard ended up making sense for these. I love the idea of thinking about them throwing things overboard, and mechanically it's very helpful for the vehicle set to have discard and drawing. It's using a lot of draw a card, then discard a card, which helps you get the right ratio of creatures to vehicles in your deck, which is always a big concern when you're putting vehicles in your deck. What if I draw the wrong combination of cards?
All right, we are going to move to our second plane. Now, the second plane we see in this race is Amonkhet. So tell us, what's the appeal of this setting? And Sarah, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, Amonkhet is in like I don't want to take over story stuff from you, Roy, but Amonkhet is in like a special place, right? They've just kind of like survived this giant war, and now the zombies, the living and the dead are working together, which I find fascinating. And we, just for like the looks of it, we ended up commissioning a series of basic land cards where you can see the driver in the foreground and then the landscape in the background. This is one of my favorite pieces in the entire set, right? The light in it really makes you think about like the Antelope Canyon in the Southwest in the United States. And I love the grittiness of the cockpit and the driver's like hands in there and those double suns. It feels ultimate fantasy. The curve of the track like makes you feel scared and for speed. And this piece is stunning to me. And it's such loose brushwork, but you see exactly what you're supposed to see from it. Yeah, I'm distracted immediately looking at that because we also have zombies pulling chariots. So birds are rad, there's a chariot in the sky, but also there's like zombie cats and zombie creatures pulling chariots
Zombie
too.
hippos?
Zombie hippos, yeah.
Which I can't imagine would be very fast, but resilient, probably.
They end up winning the race, spoilers, but
That's true.
Come on,
Slow and
you know
steady.
that hippos
We're not
kill
there yet.
so many people because of their speed.
And then
Because
I
there's
just wanted to show this piece. I know we saw the card a second ago, but oh my goodness, it's such a cool piece. All right, now Yanni,
Yeah.
what about you?
So I got to work originally on the original Amonkhet set back in the day. Honestly, the thing I love most about this world is the story aspect. Amonkhet had such a rough time in Hour of Devastation. The society was built up around these trials, and I love that the trials gave them, a love for competition. And here in this set, the Amonkhet team is joining the competition, but under their own terms, reclaiming that competition aspect from Bolas, as I love this Deathless pilot demonstrates. I did kind of want this card to be called Crash Test Mummy, but I think it's a good thing we went with a more serious tone for the Amonkhet team. I also really appreciated about Amonkhet that it's a great place for these hazards, like we see on Hazard of the Dunes and Ride's End. Amonkhet is such a dangerous world where so many things can go wrong. And I'll add, actually, in draft, the green cards like Hazard of the Dunes ended up being the strongest thing to do. And someone asked me, isn't it kind of weird that the vehicles aren't always the big thing to do instead? And I'm like, it's a death race. Not everyone makes it to the end. So I kind of like that if you're drafting vehicles in Limited, watching out for these big sandworms is a big concern.
All right, and Roy, talk to us about Amonkhet as a setting.
Sarah and Yanni touched a little bit on how Amonkhet was so previously defined by Bolas and his schemes to turn the people of the plane into an immortal army of zombies. So I won't get too much more into that. But the world building that we did on Amonkhet for this set helped it start to define itself outside of being purely like a cog in the machinations of a big evil dragon. In a really cool way. You got to see a little bit of that in the side story that we released for Amonkhet, which was written by an Egyptian fantasy author, Hadir Elsbai, which is really cool. You start to see the chitin court stirring in the desert. You start to see the deathless royals of Amonkhet before Bolas beginning to rise up and try to reclaim the lands of the living. I think we've seeded a lot of really interesting stuff for the next time we see Amonkhet.
And then moving on to what's going on in the story at this point when we get to Amonkhet.
Sure. So Amonkhet is the second leg of the race. They're ramping off sun-baked ruins and driving through dunes, doing donuts, cool stuff like that. When they're interrupted by this billowing storm cloud full of flashes of lightning and fire and winged shapes.
What could this be?
What could those be? So this is our first nod in the story at the larger story arc, the Dragonstorm arc, like I was talking about. But it's not the last, as anyone who has read the story knows.
Yes. All right, Sarah, let's talk about what the race itself looks and feels like on this plane.
Yeah, like Roy was saying, like dunes and sand, but also kind of what's interesting about it is that it's
Tell us about this guy, Sarah.
Yeah, this guy has nothing to do with what I'm saying. He just rules. I love the team you picked too. They're just like such favorites. But with Amonkhet, because it's so deserty, right? Like we have big horizons. You can see the track in front of you. You can kind of prepare for how those curves are going to happen. Like Roy said, ramping off of ruins and it's just a very different feeling than racing around the nighttime streets.
Yeah.
Where they were in Avishkar. Yeah, and then of course what's cool about the desert, moonlight. It's like a whole other thing, right? The temperature changes and it becomes different, so different than when you have that sun glaring down at you. And I love, love, love these power zombies and so many muscles. And it's just like the excitement of the race is really, really strong in this piece.
Great. Now, Yanni, what tools were there already on Amonkhet, and how did they help or hinder game design?
Yeah, I was very happy to have Amonkhet here. It did a lot of helpful things. It helped inspire the use of cycling that we see on this Basri card, which, as I talked about with the Blue-Red Pirates, having this mechanic to discard, we put on some vehicles, having this mechanic to discard certain cards and help find what you need helps a lot for finding the right ratio of creatures to vehicles. I also appreciated that the white-black team, as we see on Zahur, got to be a bit more of a slow and steady approach to racing and using the start your engines mechanic to counteract the natural tendency of the start your engines mechanic to be aggressive. And then I also love that we got some one-off cameos calling back to the original Amonkhet set. This Basri card uses the exert mechanic to keep it tapped down for a turn. We considered using stun mechanics, which is how we would do this nowadays, but we wanted to call back to the old set. And also I just love this one-off Curse Cloth Wrappings card using the Embalm mechanic, bringing back any creature as a white zombie token. Just such a cool card. It also gave us an opportunity to bring back the gods as exciting mythics. Hazoret was the only survivor from the original pantheon of 5 monocolor gods. And the original plan was to have a whole new pantheon of 4 new monocolor gods in addition to Hazoret. But in addition to all the challenges of vehicles and wanting 5 mythic gear hulks and gods just being established as epic, indestructible creatures that are pretty hard to design, I worked with the creative team to get us down to just having these 3 gods. Adding a white, black, and a green, blue god in different color pairs than the gear hulks was very helpful. And I love how these 2 new gods specifically speak to what to me are the coolest elements of Amonkhet, the cycle of life and death on Ketramos, and the fertility and bounty of the Luxa, and getting to call back to one of my favorite cards from the original Amonkhet set, Bounty of the Luxa on this god, was delightful.
Awesome. All right, everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the jungle that is Muraganda. Now, Muraganda is new to Magic, almost. So from a storytelling perspective, Roy, what is known about this plane? What needs to be settled? And what did we leave open for later down the road for future creative teams to figure out?
Yeah, so Muraganda didn't come to us with a lot known about it. There were like a couple articles here and there. There's like the mention of a Fang Druid, whatever that was. A couple cards implied like a significant presence of oozes and dinosaurs. And I really, again, I have to shout out Miguel Lopez for the second time here on this panel. He and I are sort of like Conan nuts, and we love like swords and sandals fantasy. We really, he went all out on building out Muraganda as like a real legitimate plane. So we went from a couple things here, a couple like proper nouns with no art or other connection in articles to this incredible like primordial vicious young world where the first myths are still being written, even as the mistakes of some mysterious previous world literally rain down on them. Literally, the chunks of the moon fall out of the sky, covered in mysterious ruins. Yeah, right, like that. It's so cool. I know we only got to look at it a little bit, but I would, in a heartbeat, do a whole Muraganda set. And I hope that everyone else that got a glimpse at Muraganda wants more also.
Every interview I did with anyone on the world building team was like, Muraganda's my favorite. I love Muraganda. We have to go back to Muraganda. So hopefully we get to do that. Now, Sarah, take us through the atmosphere on Muraganda. What are we going to see when we step through this particular omen path?
Yeah, Muraganda is dangerous for racing, super dangerous, because there's these like giant plates, right, that are shifting all the time, so that means the track is going to get affected by that. So there are areas where it like deliberately is going to jump the racers across chasms and be built and designed to like shift with that. We are talking jungle, so there are insectoid monsters, and there are dinosaur-like monsters, and there are a lot of like big hazardous things that are just going to come out and chomp as you're trying to like get through and get in front of the cars in front of you. And I love oozes so much. They're so fun. They're gross, they're weird, they're powerful, they're squishy, they're funny. What do they smell like? What do they sound like when they move? I really want to know all of these things, and I'm so happy that we have a bunch of oozes in this set.
Yeah.
I also need to know if they like shake like Jello when they move.
Right?
I don't think it ended up anywhere. Can we go back to the oozes just for 1 second?
Oh yeah, of course.
I don't think it ended up anywhere on cards, but buried in the world guide is the suggestion that there is like a specific legendary primordial ooze that contains like all of the memories of there's a lizard folk faction that feeds their elders to the ooze so that they can live on forever while being digested. And I just want to see that somewhere so badly.
I kind of want that option. Feed me to the ooze. Aw.
More loot.
Yeah.
Here's my boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? I want to throw something out. Can we go back to that last one?
More ooze.
It's actually just going to be the ooze panel from here on out.
Welcome to the ooze panel.
Some people have noticed there's a figure in one of these oozes that's Gerard. Don't worry, he's fine. He's really big and strong, so it's not clear whether he's behind the ooze or inside the ooze, but he'll be fine, and we will see more of him one day.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Yes, that's a question I've gotten multiple times this weekend. Is Gerard okay?
And then I just had to share this Bloodfell Caves. It's absolutely stunning.
Spencer. Incredible.
God, it just looks like the cover of like a bitchin' fantasy novel from the 70s. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it'll be fun. Yeah, I know why everyone, Harless, you're right. Everyone in the studio is like obsessed with this plane. I also really love the Speed Brood racing team. These insectoid racers with their kind of like vaguely organically shaped racing like vehicles that are like kind of part leaf and part also look like they have their own chitinous covering, chitinous? Chitinous, thanks dude. Yeah, and thank you in the audience.
The eyelashes on this character are absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And then one last terrifying loop-de-loop here.
Yeah, that's right.
Where is he going?
Oh.
Win.
Yeah, you can't, like, the blue, I'm like, is that the edge of a cliff? Like,
It's an omen path.
is this okay? Oh,
Yeah.
into the omen
The little
path.
corner of the...
Oh, beautiful. I love this.
You can't look at this set without hearing like a soundtrack in your head.
I know. All right, Yanni, let's talk about mechanics. So, excuse me, what already existed on Muraganda? How much design space did you have here as well?
So not much already existed on Muraganda. It's basically summed up by these 3 cards.
Fang Druid.
Yeah. Dinosaurs, vanilla creatures, which is creatures with no abilities, and oozes, especially the big one, the mimeoplasm. And initially we were kind of worried that this wasn't enough, and we did some explorations of what else Muraganda could be about. And we came up with some cool ideas that if we do ever get to come to Muraganda as a full world, I'd be happy to explore. But at the end of the day, it actually ended up being helpful that Muraganda didn't have too many things it needed to be about. With 10 racing teams and 2 other worlds, there was already so much going on with the set. And I love that in addition to just exploring these few themes, we got the full cycle of vanilla legendary creatures. We focus so much on draft with our Magic sets, and every card needs to do things and have a role, that it can be very hard to fit in vanilla creatures. But with the recent change to play boosters, having a higher density of uncommons, it's easier to get just individual uncommons that do their own things and don't have to play into the main set's themes of the set. And I've been drafting a lot of Aetherdrift and have managed to have successful decks with each and every one of these, and I love how they turned out so much.
Because there's no rules text also on these cards, we get a lot of flavor text room, and every one of the flavor text here, an absolute banger.
Yeah.
It tells you so much cool stuff to. Please let us go back to Muraganda. Email Mark Rosewater about it.
I'm going to pander. How do we feel about vanilla legends? Do we like them? Yeah. A lot of people were skeptical about them, so I'm bragging.
Okay, so at this point in our race, our main characters actually get marooned, and we see some action away from the actual race. I really enjoyed this part in the story. Roy, take us through what's going on here.
Yeah, so at one point, Chandra and Pia and Doretti is also there, end up rescuing loot from, he gets captured out of the Speed Demon's control by a bunch of lizard folk raiders. And they end up crashing their car in the desert in Amonkhet and having to spend the night there while they repair it and get it back in working order so that they can get back to Avishkar. This is one of those scenes that came sort of fully formed to me when I was working on the outline for this. I just knew, even though as a racer, you want to be going full throttle, pedal to the floor at all times. Stories need time for characters to take a breath, to reflect, to talk to each other, and for audiences to get a sense of what's going on inside their head, in between all of the explosions and car crashes and everything. And we got to see that here in a really cool way.
It's hard to have deep thoughts when you have your foot on the gas pedal and every turn is a new hazard. All right, now, Yanni, talk to me about the cards that represent this moment. So this feels like kind of a departure from the machines with a real focus on these human moments.
Yeah, I really appreciated the story beats, kind of slowing down a bit to give us some cards that can use the Starker Engine's mechanic, as they're definitely still part of the overall race and the story of the set, but can be less aggressive or not on creatures, and can, have some more diverse effects.
The like sad loot to happy loot trajectory is absolutely beautiful here. I just, the cage makes me so sad.
Yeah.
All right, y'all, we have reached the final stretch. We've entered the first turn of our final lap. Sarah, talk to me about some of your favorite pieces from the end of our race here.
Yeah, I mean, these are the moments, the payoff after the end, and here we have our racers with our zombie hippos in the background, right? So fast.
There they are, I guess so.
Yeah, holding aloft the Aether Spark trophy. Caradora is also like, this piece in this racer are one of my favorites in the set, because I love the contrast of the high fantasy with the mount, as opposed to like the more mechanical vehicles. And there's always like the racing themes within the pattern on the uniform and the racing outfits. Such an exciting piece. I think she came in.
This bit of art is also extra cool because it's part of a two-piece set, right? It's Captain Howler, the captain of the Cordat and Keel haulers, is like firing that laser blast that she's blocking with her shield in his art. It's part of the set.
Do you think he's laughing while he's doing it? Because I really want to know what it sounds like when a shark laughs.
I was going to ask, do you think sharks can laugh?
I mean, I think they can, but I don't know what it sounds like. I don't know if I want to hear it, actually.
Is it like dolphin-esque or just screeches, right? Like,
I feel like it would be deeper.
Like whale sounds?
Wetter.
Like a really deep, like whale song?
No one's ever known a shark to laugh, so.
Maybe one day we'll find out. And then
Someone's
I also
tell a really good joke.
After we saw the original, I want to look at the alt art as well. I think this is just so stunning.
Yeah, we did a really beautiful series of legendary alts for each of the main drivers, and this is Yuko Shimizu, a Japanese artist that we work with sometimes when we're lucky. And their style has this kind of like complex, like lithograph, like wood block carving almost to it, and the way that they use color also feels like it's been like printed by hand, instead of created digitally. And what we tried to do with each racer, it was find an artist whose style fit the style of the team. So that was a really fun kind of like exercise in pairing art styles. Yep, and here's Basri, who was winner, right? Number one, yeah, there he is. There he is, yeah, winner of the race.
Big Basri.
So, yeah.
And then we have Sita as the masked racer here, which is really
our Racer X stand-in, and a very complex, rich character in her own right in the story.
Yeah.
And then I was happy to see this piece because there is a moment in the story where Sita gets unmasked.
Yeah.
We get to see Sita's face in this card, which is amazing.
Yeah, beautiful piece of work by RK Post. Yep, and another like legendary racer special moment card.
He is cut. He is gigantic.
You have to be that powerful to go that fast. Yeah.
All right, Yanni, what's the home stretch look like for the design team?
Yeah, so the last piece to fall into place was the Aether Spark. We knew originally this was the prize, but it took kind of a while for the story to nail down that this isn't getting used by any individual. So we wanted to show that it's more about the potential of extreme power rather than showing exactly how that is used. We also decided that the set would have a headliner, which is a new thing we're doing with every set. Innistrad Remastered had Edgar Markov as its headliner, as the first one. And the whole thing sort of was inspired by The Lord of the Ring with all the One Ring treatments that were very successful. And the creative team felt very strongly that the Aether Spark was the best concept for the headliner as the big prize, which was a little scary to me since we hadn't totally figured it out mechanically yet. I've tried before to make cards that represent a creature's sparking moment of turning into a planeswalker. But turning creatures into planeswalkers has always been very challenging, and I've never really felt like I knew how to do it correctly. So I came up with this idea of representing it as a planeswalker equipment, and I was surprisingly confident that it would work out. Initially, the first concern a lot of people would have was, do the rules even make sense? But as the rules-savvy game designer that I am, I knew that actually for as long as we've had planeswalkers, we've had planeswalker equipment in the game. If you want a planeswalker equipment, very simple. Step one, you got to get the card Bludgeon Brawl. This turns all your non-creature, non-equipment artifacts into equipment, but planeswalkers aren't artifacts. So we'll take step two, bring out our Mycosync Flatus. Then step three, just find any old creature. And step four, equip Nicol Bolas to your Grizzly Bears. Swing him around like a sword, why not? So kind of going into this, knowing the rules already kind of worked out, going back to the card. I really like how these abilities came out. Drawing cards and adding a lot of mana is just a great generic representation of power. That's just what every Magic player always wants to do, and really makes you feel like you have this source of unlimited power that you can use to do whatever you want to do. For me personally, I had one game in draft where played this on turn 4, and on turn 5 I played 2 Autarch Mammoths and just had 4 elephants on the battlefield. That's what I want when I have any power, a family of elephants.
Okay, great. All right. Roy, the checkered flag has been waved. But there's still one more story beat here. So talk to us about the end of the race and then that after beat there.
Yeah. So we see Jace at the end of this race. He's trying to retrieve loot, initially from the hands of the speed demons, but then he finds out it's actually Chandra who gets to the finish line with loot, and he has no time for any of that. So we see Jace start to take some steps towards, I don't want to say a villainous route exactly, but like he does some bad stuff here. He does a lot of mind control.
Oh, he does a lot of mind control. He's making some choices.
Yeah. So he succeeds. He gets loot. He and Vraska vanish from the end of the set, or for the end of the story. But then we get a stinger at the end, right? Like I said, Aetherdrift is the third story in our 4-story larger arc, the Dragonstorm arc. And I think we all know it's going to end up at Tarkir at this point. On Bloomborough,
Anyone excited for Tarkir?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We've seen like inklings, right, that in addition to all the opportunity that the Omen Paths offer, the planar communication and like characters traveling between worlds, cultural exchange, all of that. There's also risks. And in Bloomborough, we saw a non-native species arrive on that plane, a dragon that gets Bloomborough-ized into a great lightning-breathing hawk that terrorizes the adorable little cuties all over Bloomborough.
So rude.
We saw.
Had a good reason though. Let's be fair.
Well, we saw in Duskmorn, Kaito sees like visions of dragons scouring an unprotected city, just leveling it to the ground. And then in Aetherdrift, a dragon comes through an Omen Path into Girapur and attacks the city. And it's only with the arrival of Elspeth that they managed to fend it off without too much harm. there's a lot of story threads that are colliding at the end of this arc, right? There's the rampant dragon storms, there's whatever Jason Vraska are up to, and there's whatever's going on Tarkir, which no one knows about just yet. It's all going to come to a head, so stay tuned.
Now, if you haven't been able to check out this arc so far, that's Bloomburrow, Duskmorn, and of course Aetherdrift, you can go to the website to read it, of course, mtgstory.com. We didn't even practice that. You can also find narrations by me and my co-host of the Magic Story podcast, Natalie, that's available on our YouTube. That's also available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your podcast.
I'm a big fan of listening to audiobooks and story while doing chores, washing dishes, driving to work. So any number of things that you have been putting off, but you need to do, I know you do.
All right, everyone. Our race has ended, but at MagicCon, everyone wins. We hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend. From Roy Graham, Sarah Wassel, Yanni Skolnick, and me, Harla Snyder. Goodbye.